Hello, my lovely anatomists and physiologists. We want to talk here a little bit about what we can call cardiac reflexes. So these are some of the controls that we have for both heart rate and stroke volume. So things that we can talk about as like controlling cardiac output, if you want to say it that way. The first one on our list is proprioceptors. And proprioceptors we first talked about in Anatomy and Physiology Part 1. And we talked about them as being located in our synovial joints and our ligaments and our tendons, and kind of our way of detecting the position of our body in space. So it's definitely part of it. But this is also going to be a signal for us to know how much our body's moving, right? So what we see is that when we exercise, we're going to increase the proprioceptor firing. And this is going to signal to increase our heart rate. And this makes beautiful sense. So if we're moving our body more, we're going to need to increase our heart rate to increase our cardiac output to support that. And if we're just laying there or sitting and hardly moving, then that's an important piece of information as well. And that can help us to slow down our heart rate. When we look at our baroreceptors, this is detecting pressure. So these are going to be special stretch receptors. And we see these located in our large blood vessels, such as your aorta, carotid artery. And we also see it located in our heart chambers. And these baroreceptors, these stretch receptors, are going to signal to control our blood pressure. So what we'll see is when we have elevated blood pressure, then we're going to have an increase of the stretch of our baroreceptor. And when we have increase to the stretch of our baroreceptor, it's going to increase its signaling or firing, like we wrote in the above example. And so what this will actually do is increase our parasympathetic signaling, control of the heart. So that's slowing down our heart rate, and it's going to trigger vasodilation. So what this is saying is if our blood pressure is high, here's two ways we can quickly bring it down. And this doesn't mean high like need a lot of adjustment, but maybe just a slight amount of adjustment. So we can slow down our heart rate with our parasympathetic nervous system, as we discussed in the previous video. And we can dilate the vessels. That immediately decreases blood pressure. We see the opposite scenario when our blood pressure is low. We are not sending the stretch signal. So we have decreased our signaling here of these receptors. And so when that happens, we actually increase our sympathetic control of the heart. So if our blood pressure has dropped a little bit, then we're going to increase our heart rate and we're going to do vasoconstriction. So these are two quick, easy adjustments that can real quickly just bump up your blood pressure just enough to get you normalized. We talked about the chemoreceptors already. So we mentioned already they're responding to concentration of carbon dioxide gas, hydrogen ion gas, and oxygen gas. I don't know why I said hydrogen ion gas. It's just an ion. And what we talked about here is when you are active, you're going to see elevated CO2, elevated hydrogen ion, and decreased oxygen. And so this would lead to an increase of your heart rate. And then we said if you had the opposite, decrease of CO2, decrease of hydrogen ion, and an increase of oxygen, this would indicate tissue at rest. And so we would expect to see a decrease in your heart rate. When we talk about our limbic system, this is, remember, our motivational system. This is, remember, our emotional system. So this could be anticipation of activity, or this can be anticipation of stress. So if we anticipate increased activity or stress, then this can be a signal to increase our heart rate. And then, of course, we're going to have the opposite consideration. If we're able to instead anticipate rest, then we're going to decrease our heart rate. So this is a little bit of a limbic system. It's in your cerebrum. It's a higher control. And to some extent, you know, we have a thought around our activity or motivation, our emotions, our feelings. And then to some extent we don't. So this is an interesting connection here. And then the last one to mention here is our body temperature. So if we increase our body temperature, we'll see that this is going to increase your heart rate. And this makes sense because if your body temperature is elevated, then probably your body is active. And if we decrease our body temperature, we're probably doing very little activity. And so this is going to slow down our heart rate. All right. Stay tuned. I think up next, we're getting ready to start looking at blood vessels. Let me check on that. Yep. As always, take care of yourselves and each other.